right.
So do you want to get started?
Yeah, let's get
sure.
into this book, because considering it's like part one here.
No, of course.
I don't want us to go like too long here, because obviously part two should be longer to like kind of like wrap up major themes, but yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna discuss though I would say just amazing book so far. Jacques the Fatalist by Denis Diderot. Written in mid 70s,
1785.
Yes, that's right. And so let's just get the general remarks on the table. Out of 10, what would you guys score this?
I would give it a 10 so far from what I've read.
I agree.
I think this is one of the best books I've read in the past
I was
going to
say this undoubtedly makes my top 10, perhaps top 5 list of just like my favorite books so far.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
We're all three of us are in between a third and a half of the way in.
Yes.
Yes.
Giffen. I mean, one thing I want to say real fast is, I didn't know Diderot was so funny. He's so funny.
He's very funny.
I knew nothing about him, like, to be frank.
No.
I knew he was French.
Adam and I were chatting about him a little bit on Saturday, and I honestly expected the book to be more dry, given that this guy is an undoubtedly a genius and a polymath, but he also has he's a fantastic writer. I mean, obviously, the translation is fantastic by Michael Henry. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, so yeah, we just have like the Penguin Books edition, which is, I mean, it's fantastic. It's like the English is perfect. Like I have to imagine this is a fantastic, translation.
Yeah, and am I like misremembering this? Because I was under the impression that like this book was like written kind of in a vague period of time and then was published posthumously.
Well, it said that I looked it up and it said it was originally published in 85, but you're right. In the introduction, it says
he died in 84. That's why I was like skeptical.
Okay, that makes sense.
I was like, I thought it was written in 85.
Well, yeah, first published in 85. And like you just said, I mean, in the introduction, we read that he did release like an excerpt, which wasn't received too fondly at the time. But I mean, clearly he was way ahead of his time because the book's hilarious. So,
and in the introduction, didn't it also add that it was not sort of well received for maybe like decades, if not a century? Like, people were just sort of confused and they thought it was like a mad book almost.
Yeah, people did not get it at all.
Yeah,
evidently.
Which is like astonishing. I mean,
it's a shame.
It's like it holds up today as though it was written like 10 years ago. It's like amazing. I mean, obviously
it holds up extraordinarily. I mean, it's not that it holds up extraordinarily, it's that it only could be held up, it feels like, in the future. Like, this guy was literally writing ahead of his time. There's no better example than this.
Yeah.
No, he knows he's a genius too. I mean, like when he says, like, only geniuses should write, and what if one isn't a genius? One shouldn't write. So it's like, it's I mean, it's beautiful writing. I mean, he's so funny, and like the ideas are great. So
that's actually worth mentioning. You kind of hinted at it, but like, this is another book with like an odd structure. Like so obviously it seems like the main kind of narrative we're going to be looking for is Jacques and his master, right? Like, those are the two primary characters, but we also have it told from a kind of unnamed narrator, who at times will kind of just like go off on tangents in the story, and he will impose like a reader's perspective in like the writing, like speak as if he was a reader and then respond to said fictionalized reader. So it's a very interesting structure, and it makes it's great for comedy.
Yeah, and
he'll put in lines for like the reader as if they were interjecting, and he like mocks the reader.
There's just this constant dialogue with the reader where it's like, I mean, sometimes, like, I don't know if this happened to you, like, things did pop to my head that he then, like, goes on to address, just like in a...
Yeah, it's like, you wanted to know about the third...
way.
Yeah, he's like, you want to know about the third man, and it's like, he's speaking as the reader, like, the third man!
Yeah. Or like, Giffen, as you were saying, like, he will kind of dip into like kind of side stories where you'll just kind of get lost like in these tales that the narrator's telling, and then he'll catch you and he'll say like, oh, you're loving this right now, but don't you want to go back to the other? And it's just like, well, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I am enjoying this. And he's like, all right, we'll stay with this for a while. And it's like, okay. So
you get a couple pages of the continued thing. And then he promises like, oh, we'll get back to this later. And then you do. Well, maybe not all of them yet, but.
He's like writing this as though he was able to sort of like clone himself, write to himself, and then respond as himself, and then like filter that back into it's honestly like a work of genius.
It is.
Yeah, this is extraordinarily anticipatory. Like all of the interjections that a reader might make, and it sounds like all of the people who reviewed his work evidently did not like kind of take
people were dullards.
This doesn't conform to the form of the novel. Therefore,
I was actually thinking about this, and I want to hear from you guys on this. But I was thinking about, okay, how many authors have I actually read from the 1700s? I actually can't think of any books that I've read in full from the 1700s, other than the book we're reading right now. Like I've read excerpts from like different books. I've read books, earlier than the 1700s, obviously, like the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, or but the point like full Shakespeare, of course. But but like from the 1700s specifically, can you guys think of any books you've read from the 1700s?
I have read full works by Kant. But that's not like, it's a different genre, obviously. I mean, the only other thing, I mean, it's like, it's from 1641, but is the Descartes' Meditations. Again, it's like a very short book, but again, different genre. Like it doesn't, you know what I mean?
But once again, I can point out books I've read before the 1700s, but my point is that like, I don't know how much great literature was being produced during that period. It's not that there wasn't, it's that I just think that there was like this sudden explosion in the 1800s where we can all just name countless authors we've read from like the 19th century, but the 18th century, I just wonder if like this is so ahead of its time.
It really must.
You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah, that's the point I'm driving at. Is that
of course,
So like it's crazy. Like this style was probably so unique.
Yeah. So in terms of the context as well, this was written by a Frenchman before the Revolution, like the French Revolution as well. That's kind of important. It's like pretty close to like the beginning as well of the Revolution. But by the time it was published, it was written probably a decade or several decades before. But you wouldn't know that just from reading this. It almost seems to anticipate like across dimensions. There's kind of like subtle political commentary, social commentary. This kind of comedic through line. And no, I was like actually looking through kind of like famous works in the 1700s just because you asked the question. I also was looking at my bookshelf, and I don't think I've read anything from this time period, like books.
Yeah,
this is incredible.
Yeah,
no, literally besides just like a few pieces of academic philosophy, that's it.
Yeah, like, I can reference like certain, like Adam said, excerpts that I've read around this time. I mean, we're talking about like around the founding of the U.S., so endless political works there, for example. But
sure.
Books, no,
definitely not. And like, yeah. So I mean, there's really almost no narrativity to the story in any important sense. Maybe I mean, the basic detail is that. So there are these two main characters that Giffen you already mentioned, Jacques and his master, and they're basically just traveling the countryside. And the writer, makes
narrator.
Thank you. The narrator makes it almost a point not to include sort of what they're doing or where they're going, because he says it doesn't matter. Like the focus is on their dialogue.
He brings up, like, from the reader's perspective, this kind of like, where are they going? Like, where do they come from? And the narrator goes like, from where they were at, and like they're going to where they will be.
He
teasingly like
It reminded me so much of Nagel's The Absurd, because he offered examples of places and said, if it were at, blank, would that be more meaningful than if they came from like another city? And he was just like, no. He's like, your mind craves these insignificant details.
Yeah, he's anticipating kind of your response, and he's saying, like, don't worry about these things, focus on these other things. The only thing I'll say is that, like, putting this down for a few days, like I did that between like earlier last week and then like last Wednesday until like this Saturday, I was in the middle of this kind of like place where I had to kind of go back and read a few pages actually to kind of get caught up, because I was like in a side story. And then like after the end of the side story, which I had to go back to the beginning of, it picked up on like the main narrative with Jacques and his master, and I was like, okay, I don't remember where we were at here, so I had to go back again. So it's better for bulk reading, I think. But that's like a very, very mild comment, not even like a real criticism.
I actually totally agree with you, because when I have been reading this book, it's been for like a 2-hour period of time where I just like sit down and just like binge it, loving every second of it. You know what I mean? But I do agree that it would be a tough book to like pick up and try to read like 10 or 20 pages at a time, because it's just like because
I read like I think 70 pages, and then it was like a 3-day break, and then it was like another 40, and I was like, I literally had to like reset like very aggressively to like fully grasp what was happening in the narrative, the sub narrative, and then like the narrator's comments of like anticipating the reader's response to like the sub narrative and the narrative. I was like, so that was a little bit heavy, and also there's not a very clear kind of superstructure of like chapters or anything. It's very much just kind of like flowing,
It's essentially one long essay. Yeah.
So on like a lighter note here, what was the funniest part that you have found so far? I like keep in mind, like I've only read the first 90 pages so far.
Yeah, I'm not much farther than you, so I haven't seen that much more funny. So I found I kind of want to start because this is what I was looking at before. I wanted to make sure Adam had gotten to this point yet. This is mostly funny in like our context. But this is on page like 80. Whenever the master is kind of commenting on Jacques' like kind of state of mind and like kind of philosophy, and he says, "Jacques, my friend, you're a philosopher, and I'm sorry for you." that line just kind of stung, especially like in the context of what we're doing here. I thought it was very, 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 very funny.
No, I laughed at that. I was just like,
Jordan, my friend.
Yeah.
Two parts where I just cackled. So I love the scene where, okay, so he was obviously like wounded in a battle, right? We don't know, we might know the battle, but that's unimportant. But the point is that he was shot in the knee and he's being carted to the hospital, right? And it's clear that, this caravan that he's a part of, he's like near the back. So if and when he makes it to the hospital, he might be dead by then. But he's passing by this
hospital
cottage.
Might fill up by even if they do get
it's
there,
possible,
right?
Sure. But they're passing this cottage, and there's a woman standing at the door, right? And like he calls out to her, and like she comes and like brings him inside and like begins to like tend to him. And one of the early, first things you notice is that like the husband is just like a very kind of irritable man, just like. And it's like he's very, very unhappy that his wife has brought in like this wounded soldier, and we soon learn why, because like once they've sent off like their son to go get like a surgeon, like he then reappears with like 4 different surgeons who all demand like food and wine. And like they're not even like kind of like taking any care of Jacques. Like Jacques is just like lying on this cot while they're just like bickering and filling themselves up with like pretty much like the stores of this household.
And this is a peasant family.
It's a peasant family, and it's clear that there's some sort of like depression going on as well, where it's like prices are high, like food is scarce, and like the husband begins to like kind of like enter into like this refrain where it's something along the lines of like, why the devil was she at the door?
Yes. And it's just I was actually cackling at that.
I was cackling because it was every time like because it would like
pages and pages every time. It's like subtle interjection, but
exactly be like another round, and they'd be like, why the devil was she at the door? it's just like a few
I'll
other
stitch
pages.
I'll stitch the man up, but bring another bottle.
Why the devil was she at the door? just like furious.
This poor peasant guy is just getting his coffers like drained by these like half incompetent surgeons that were half of them weren't even welcome.
Yeah, what the devil was she doing at the door?
So
That's the phrase. What the devil was she doing at the door? It is just like the interjection of that phrase is always so perfectly timed too. Where there's
foundation of comedy.
Yeah, where there's like this lull where there's just like where it's just like I don't know, like Jacques like laying in the cot, and you know the two peasants, like the husband and his wife, are like arguing off to the side, and they're just like, you know, what are we gonna do about him? And then she's just like, oh no, actually my favorite moment's this one where this, like they're having a conversation with the surgeon and they're like, how long do you think it'll take for him to get better? A month? And he's like, a month, 4 at least. And he's like, what the devil was she doing at the door?
Just burning through their savings.
Yeah, exactly.
The peasant savings.
No, it was like the anguish of like,
crop yields are low, bread prices are high, and the wine stores are gone.
He was clearly like a calloused man who just like didn't care about his fellow Frenchmen. just
you can't even blame him too. Like these surgeons who probably are pretty well off are draining them in like one day.
No, it was horrible. And then they were both just like arguing about like having sex later that night.
That was deeply uncomfortable. Jacques just like staring at the ceiling, like listening to this conversation.
Because they were like divided by this like very flimsy partition that was like almost see-through. You kind of got the sense where it was like, yeah, you could kind of catch like, you know, glimmers of movement or something.
Silhouettes.
Yeah, and the wife was just like, but what if he hears? He's like, let him hear.
And then she's like, but if you impregnate me, like then we'll have another mouth to feed and you'll blame me for that and beat me. And he's like, no, I won't do that this time.
They keep saying no to everything she says. Then finally she acquiesces, and he's like, yes. Yeah, so like,
it was horrible.
Yeah,
and you won't blame me this time. No.
Yeah. It was. And then Jacques just like, you know, just kind of passed out after that.
And then my other favorite scene that I just cackled about was like the mad horse that that
wandered
like,
off to the gallows every time.
Yeah, and it's just like the interjections while he's trying to tell the story.
Yes,
and just occasionally like, you damn horse, because like it says that like it couldn't walk straight, so it kept just occasionally like moving its head to like the left or the right, where it just like it would just begin like walking off in a different direction, like off the road essentially, and you would have to like kind of like, you know, jerk the horse back into place. And those interjections are hilarious too, because once again, you're lulled like into the story, then suddenly you read like I'll be damned with this horse, and it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was naturally integrated pretty well. It was at the end, because a lot of the times it was like at the end of a paragraph of like content about the narrative or the, you know, the sub narrative, whatever. But like it'd be like, you know, and then we were walking, Jacques were calling, and then we were walking to the damn this horse.
Yeah.
There were also many antiquated insults that I found very funny, like in hindsight. I mean, partially because of the antiquated language. My favorite one though was while they're in the this is probably very close to where you stopped off, Adam. They're in the inn, or like the tavern or whatever, Jacques and his master, and the kind of like the tavern owner's wife, who's kind of like the hostess. She's running everything. You know, she's kind of trying
dog.
With the dog. She's trying to take care of everyone. And just like, you're just some like angry patron, just like, and from another corner of the inn, a frantic man was shouting, "Damn you, you demented chatterbox. What are you doing?" I just love like the image of like, damn you, damn you, you demented chatterbox. He was just like waiting on his ale. He was just like, damn you.
Yeah.
It's just a very funny book.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find one of those quotes where he the horse interrupts Here, you keep going. I'm gonna look for that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that was really. I mean, that was the only funny thing that came to mind for me. I also did find like I found the other. It was like one of the digression stories, very funny, where I think you've gotten to this, Adam, where the where the baker's wife.
Baker.
Yeah, did you get to that, Adam?
I don't think so. No.
Shoot,
that was funny
okay.
as well.
Okay, well,
the third man in the prison in the sub narrative, which gets this an aside by the
Okay, I won't ruin it, but it's like a very funny, just like mini story. It's like, you know, a page and a half long or whatever. But I mean, like, I guess I don't know. I like the way I was kind of reading this story is the dialogue between Jacques and his master it's a conversational way to deliver packages of almost not, I don't want to call it thought experiments, but just sort of reflections on different philosophical topics and just life topics in general, which I thought was, it's like, it's not an aphoristic book in the way that, you know, Sartre could be and Dostoevsky could be. I mean, there's not like, well, actually, I mean, there's not a lot of lines that like have made it into common phraseology. He even remarks on that one time, like the devil, like why the devil was she at the door? He says will not be, you know, like inscribed in the halls of famous sayings or whatever.
Yeah, because it's like missing a certain quality that other sayings have.
Yeah. But there were many quotes from this that I thought were just like brilliant and precise, just like constellations of things that I've been thinking about for years, and he put it in just like a few sentences in a perfect way.
Yeah,
like a perfect way.
Yeah, Adam, did you find the horse paragraph? Because I found a good one.
Oh. Yeah. Why don't you read yours? But I found some too here. But
yeah, I found a paragraph that has like multiple, so I think this will be good.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You know, neither my protests. And then kind of ... Neither my protests nor those of anyone else did any good. The only solution was to separate them. The Minister of War was informed of their extraordinary persistence in these extremes of behavior, and my captain was given command of a fortress with strict orders to present himself there immediately, and an absolute prohibition on leaving it. For his part, my captain's friend was forbidden from leaving the regiment. I think this damned horse will drive me insane. Hardly had the orders of the minister arrived than my captain, under the pretext of going to, you know, present his thanks for the favor bestowed upon him, left for court, and, you know, blah blah blah. It's like, since the minister only had it in his mind to separate these two strange men, and since generous behavior always has an effect on people, it was decided, damned beast, can't you keep your head straight? It was decided that my captain would stay in the regiment and his friend would be transferred. So
you know what that reminded me of, Adam?
Ellipses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was the modern day equivalent of that is like, okay, like you and I like multiple times have been driving in that Subaru where we're both like having a conversation, the car makes some ungodly noise and you'll just be like, this damn car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally like the dialogue there is exactly how real life conversations go.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Supernatural. Very natural.
and the writing was so good that I just kept dipping back into the story that he was telling, and then just like that abrupt kind of halt as he would curse the beast that he was on. I mean, like the humor was so funny because like I loved the idea that the horse would just occasionally just go full gallop, like off to like the gallows,
stumble upon gallows, and then you go back to the master, and the master would be like, "Oh, Jacques, like a premonition."
Yeah, but then the one time, like it was like the third, maybe second or third time, the horse bolted towards the gallows, and it said the master like threw his head back in laughter, even after he himself had declared it like a premonition for the future.
It was when the horse started like bolting down the road, and it was just like he was like off to find some more gallows. You can just imagine
cackling,
and it's like just like this demented beast that can't walk straight that occasionally just lurches toward the gallows, and it's just like.
Yeah, no, all of these kind of like natural interjections that might otherwise be called from like kind of a more trimmed story or narrative, I think added a lot to like the characterizations as well, because I'm like super invested in these characters, even though we like, as like the narrator remarks, like we don't know where they're going or where they're coming from, but like we're nevertheless super invested.
We don't even know much about them either. It's like really you don't know a whole lot.
No, actually, it might be worth mentioning at this point that so even within like the main narrative that is Jacques and his master, aside from the narrator's interjections of side stories that may or may not be relevant to that, Jacques is trying to tell his master a story of his loves, which is kind of like the sub narrative within the main narrative. And that keeps getting interrupted by by people and events in Jacques and the master's narrative and by the narrator himself. So we kind of like, even like the one thing that we are kind of promised is like we will find out about Jacques, because it's like, the master's like, I will hear this damn story to the end, even that keeps getting interrupted. So it's like, well, I'm not even sure if we'll get that promise in the end, but like, nevertheless, I'm super invested in these characters at this point.
And it's like, that's a good story, but even if it were to end where we don't get a conclusion to that, I'm perfectly okay with that, because the journey itself is so entertaining right now. Where just like the constant interjections, like the nonsense that they get involved in. I mean, like I loved the scene where they came across like what was that, like the cortege, where it was like that black carriage being drawn by like those dark horses, and there was a guy with kind of like a floppy brim hat who was also in pure black, and then there were like priests as well, and this was like it was like obviously like some sort of like funeral procession, right?
For his captain, he surmised.
Yeah, supposedly, right? And
yeah,
but then like like he mourns like the death of his captain, which that's also a super funny scene, because as he's crying, like
I had a point about that.
Go ahead with that one, because that's pretty funny.
It was so funny because while he's just like weeping over finding out that his captain has died, and to assuage the pain, his master tells him this, like gives it this like absurd diatribe basically about how he almost like just had some like just like spun some yarn about how they were like romantically entangled, and that made Jacques like so annoyed and like so angry at him that he completely just his sorrow was transformed into annoyance. And I actually thought, like, because at first I thought, I was just like, I read that, I was just like laughing while I read it, and I was like, actually though, that's exactly how emotions work, where I don't know, it's just like I don't know, obviously, like all three of us have talked to each other where like what someone's like upset over something, and it's just like the way to, like, you never actually fix the thing that they're upset about. I mean, if it's like minor, you obviously can, but like the way to actually make them feel better is to either make them like angry about something else, or like
that's the choice you make.
Yeah, it's just, you know what I mean, or like, or
no,
just
no,
like,
it's so true.
You can redirect it.
Yeah, it's like
and the master comments that he's like, but see, Jacques is like, why are you telling me this? Like, I know I'm pissed, and then the master's like, but now you're distracted. Like, you're no longer mourning.
And it's clear like the master like didn't really have that intention, right? Like like based on the dialogue, he thought he was, and like if you read like what he was saying, like we could go through it, but I don't think it's obvious that it's about a lover, right? Like I think that it doesn't seem that way until Jacques recognizes that it's about, like, it was written by either a man or a woman. Jacques thinks it was written by a man, by a woman about his lover.
Yes.
So like the thing is, like, it wasn't the text itself, but it was the recognition that it was written in this context for a lover, that it was just like
it just infuriated Jacques.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like, so the master was like Giffen said, oh yeah, well, I did this on purpose in a sense. Like, did I not get the desired effect? And it was like, that was a pretty funny scene, because he was just like, it's like, I have a question for you, master. What the devil are you doing? It's like, or what the devil are you saying to me right now?
Yes. I loved that because it's just like, I don't know, it struck home for me. You know what I mean? Like if you're just like you're just like concerned over something or whatever, like the instantaneous way to forget about that is just become angry about something else.
I love how there could be any emotion that can be transferred to, and Jordan's just like anger.
Yeah, it's so true.
or just like to get like get humor or anger, but you just have to direct the emotions away from or just change someone's kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to like the funeral procession, I love just like the oddities in this book, like the fact that like Jacques had this sudden premonition that there was something, there was a reason to return to the procession, because he noticed that there was like suddenly like a new ring of people around the procession. And because they were going to kind of encounter it again, like they could kind of see it, but he was like, suddenly he had this premonition, like, my master's not dead. And this was before he even got close.
Captain.
So then Captain. So then he like rides up to like the procession, and the priests that had been traveling now had their hands tied behind their backs.
Yeah.
The the coach driver also had his hands tied behind his back, and suddenly that there were like armed like militants, like in a sense, like surrounding the carriage, and we don't really know what the reason for that was. All we know is that when Jacques arrived, like one of them said like, come any further and you're dead, like with a weapon pointed at him, and like Jacques was like and turned around. Like
and it was implied that there or at least they were kind of thinking about, they must have been using the coffin to smuggle some goods or something like that.
Maybe like it was never, we never really kind of know what that was about there. I mean,
I doubt we will find out.
Yeah.
No, and it's also like, I don't know, life is definitely full of those very just odd moments where your mental projections eerily fit onto the world, but then are not answered fully in that way. It's hard to come up with an example because it's hard to really kind of absorb them just because you don't get a resolution. But I've definitely had those just like, I don't know, it's just like, I've definitely just been on, I don't know, like public transportation or something, and just like had this weird feeling that like someone was definitely just like strange for no reason whatsoever. But then, a few minutes later, that person will do something extremely strange, just like confirm every suspicion I had. But then you don't, that's it. Like you don't get to learn anything about like their backstory or it's just like this weird kind of fleeting moment where you're just projections onto the world were confirmed and then just disappeared
off the train.
It was so similar to me. Like right when I read that scene, I had like a flashback to Nausea. Like whenever like Antoine sees the Flasher in the park originally, sitting on the bench alone, and there like he has sort of like this premonition as well that like something is odd, right? Like something about this is sinister, but obviously it's a little bit different in this case, but there's certainly like this kind of feeling about the whole situation that you really can't put your finger on, but it's certainly, I've been in the situations before where something is just strange.
Yes.
Where you can't put your finger on exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe you can point to several different things, but it's just suddenly the atmosphere has changed. And that was one of these, that was like another scene like that for me here, where it was like, there was something deeply strange about that scene.
Yeah. Yes. Like it also reminded me of just like the unbelievable nature of life sometimes. Like I feel like I've had many of these experiences where just, I don't know, like remember when I told you guys about that insane experience on the bus ride to Maine with that guy with like the face tattoos? It was just like, that was like an insane experience that was not resolved at all.
No.
It was just like it was literally like a page and a half digression. Do you know what I mean? In the story, it would be like if I was telling you guys about, like one of you were my master and you would just be like, tell me about like where you've traveled. It would be just like a little interlude in the travels, or I don't know. It struck me that like that actually is how life is experienced.
No, for sure. And like there were just so many strange things about that scene. Like for example, like members of that caravan, of that procession, like confirmed that this was like a procession for like the dead captain. And it's like, okay, well, they could have just said that. Okay, well, why were his arms there? Okay, well, maybe they stole his arms. But it was like each of these things made it almost seem like, okay, yes, this in fact was like a funeral procession for the captain. But was it at the end? Like, it very well could have been. Like, I feel like they almost like decided on like kind of like an answer to what it was without actually confirming what it was, where they were like, oh yes, well, it was probably them smuggling loot essentially, right? But in reality, we have no idea.
Not a clue.
This might have to get cut, but this literally reminded me of something from our childhood. We're like, and I don't know. This might have been like, I don't know that you were involved with this. You might have been, but like Adam, this might have to get cut. I don't know. Adam, do you remember we were in my church? And it was literally exactly like this, where we both just noticed something extremely odd about like the collection plates, how they were taken into the back and counted by the one guy. And then we just thought, oh, that's strange. But then like it was his captain's suit of armor, they confirmed it. We uncovered all of these just like very strange details too about how, this one guy would just count the money of all of the collections. Much of it was in cash. And then also we discovered that guy and his wife were both like public school teachers, but they had this like mansion, basically.
They did.
Yeah. And it was just like, whoa, that's odd. And then we also figured out that the treasurer was that guy's son-in-law. We were like, oh, that's weird.
And I still recall, like, as kids, like I think you had to go up these stairs to get to the room where they would count the money. And we began following while there weren't people around, we started like walking up those stairs, and we were immediately like met at the top of the stairs by like with someone who came out of the door, and they're like, "You may not come up here."
Yes.
And then select few were allowed to like ascend into this room to like where the money was, and there was always something very sinister about that.
I know, and it never got resolved, and we just had to sort of like Jacques. I mean, maybe later in the book, like the question of his captain's life gets answered, but we never got an answer to that. You know what I mean? Unless we probably won't, unless it's like breaking on the news in like years or whatever.
$12 million in tithes, tithes going to a school teacher's mansion.
Yeah, 12 million.
Yeah, I mean, who knows whether there was even like a shred of embezzlement there? But there were signs that we noticed that hinted toward embezzlement. So,
and there was just like a deep, I don't know why, but it almost makes me sad to think that some of this is going away the longer I live. And maybe it's just like that childlike kind of, almost like the openness to possibilities, or maybe it's also just that things were less digitized back then. But it just seemed like, I don't know, it seemed like the world was kind of full of these very strange possibilities. And I don't know, maybe it also has to do with like the type of life you're living now, where there's not, I don't know, you could think if like your life is too, like we were talking about routines or whatever before this, like if your life gets too entrenched in a routine, you don't have the opportunity to see kind of the strangeness to it. I don't know.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of it.
It's like mental energy going into the observation too kind of might be the thing. Like, I think it's all too easy if you're like busy to like just ignore things that aren't directly relevant.
Well, and also think about like how often you actually just observe the world. Nowadays, it's fucking never.
Yeah.
It's never. Like I don't know, when we were growing up, we were forced into many situations on like a daily experience, essentially, where the only thing you had to entertain yourself was what was going on, like in the situation. You know what I mean? But
100%.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely have a almost like a just like a desire to go back to that in many ways. It's just like, yeah, I mean, it's great that my phone has like, I can just find out anything I want to know at any time, but like, most of the time I use it just fuck off,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, I think it does kind of like reduce like the strangeness of life and just like, and yeah, I mean, what would we be doing otherwise if we didn't have phones? Well, we might be like, spending evenings in like, in the city where we would observe things like this all the time. I mean, I imagine like, I mean, even like the other weekend when I was in New York City, just walking around, I observed a ton of crazy stuff just walking around New York City, right? So it's like you definitely don't get those moments on a phone.
No. Do you guys want to talk about? I mean, I definitely thought at least one of the main themes running through the book so far was extremely interesting. Obviously it's Jacques the Fatalist,
right?
And I mean, we can just talk about. I have like a bunch of notes that I thought were very interesting about this, but basically, Jacques is, even Giffen, you said he's almost derided by his master as a philosopher.
Yes.
And he is very much a fatalist in the sense that he believes, he kind of has that mantra that he just constantly almost chants in retort to people, if it's written above, it'll happen that way, or, it was written above.
It must have been written above.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And apparently, I think he got this expression from his captain as well. So that kind of ties back to the...
I didn't catch that.
There were a lot of his expressions that he just kind of picked up from his captain.
Okay,
so I think that was one of them. Clearly he embraces it though.
So. Oh yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's this like tension that runs through the book where obviously, Jacques is someone who believes that in some sense his fate is inscribed in the universe already,
preordained.
Exactly. Yeah. He talks about destiny. But yet, because he doesn't know what his destiny will be, he has to sort of act as if he were free in a lot of ways.
That sounds about right.
And it's like he actually has like a very sophisticated like understanding of like what it means to be free, because like he recognizes like, I mean, there's a certain dialogue earlier in the book where he says something along the lines of how could I not be myself? How could I be anything other than myself? Right? Yeah. In the sense that, he acts in such a way that is consistent with his character and nothing more. Right?
There's no alternative.
Exactly. It's like his behavior is a reflection of him, and ultimately his behavior couldn't have been otherwise because it's a reflection of who he is, and like his character his character in some sense is like immutable, and if it is mutable then it's outside of himself. So it's so I think there's like a more sophisticated view of like free will than maybe just like fatalism, like like the word might imply. That
like the tension there is it's not like an unhappy one in the book either, because he recognizes that sort of whatever will happen, and there's nothing that you can really do. I mean, he kind of introduces this idea like early on in the book where they're he and his master are traveling, and remember they barricade those men in the room. It was preemptive defense, and
it ended up they were concerned for a moment that it was backfiring.
Yeah, with they barricaded those guys in the room and then just went to sleep. And his master was just kind of fretting about what if they break down the door? Like, what if they get in here? Like, what if they just kill us in our sleep? And Jacques responds, well, whatever will happen will happen. We've already barricaded the door. Like, we can't unbarricade it and then go to sleep. Like, that's not an option. So he's like, well, we've already done the best we can. Now it's just time to sleep. And I don't know, like, honestly, whenever I'm curious, like, if you relate to this, Adam, but I think that whenever I'm in the best kind of life and mental state, I like very much echo that thought process where it's just like, do whatever you're going to do. And then you can't, like, that's all you can do. There's no, it's just the thing where like Jacques' master staying up and fretting over what will happen doesn't do any good.
That's where I'd like to be. Like, there are probably, I'd have to like think on it, but like rarely have I been in a position in life where I'm like able to take that more stoic kind of mindset where it's like, everything within my control, I've done as much as I can, and it will be what it will be after that. You know what I mean? Like I
I feel like you have to have like a very strong contentment with your actions and that to take that stance, because otherwise you'll kind of be, almost pre-regretting, your previous actions. But if you kind of were like, regardless of what the results are, like, are happy with the decisions you made with the information you had, then I feel like you can take that stance reasonably. But so I feel like I've done that before, but it very much I'm a worrier. So
yeah.
It's all too easy to just go like, a million different things could have been different.
It's definitely just an indicator that I'm sort of I don't know, like in the right flow is not exactly the way to put it, but things are humming along smoothly. Like when I have that mentality, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
For sure.
That's what kind of my point was. Is like things had to have gone well from your perspective, even after the decision was made, even before you know the results, in order to take that perspective.
Yeah, because I remember after I submitted all of my applications to the grad programs, I was just like, I was being so stupid. I was being like Jacques Master. I was just like, oh, I would think like I could have phrased this better, and like I could have alluded to like this philosopher from there, or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, but enough. Like they're in. Just, you know what I mean? Just stop. Like it's not going to do any good. Because I would literally sit
Worrying
down
is just a pure negative.
It's so stupid. It doesn't get you anything.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't consider myself a very fretful person, like not an especially one. But I've it's hard to kind of I can remember certain situations in college where I was able to adopt that mindset where it's like, I did everything I could for this exam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So at this point, like, however it turns out, like, I'm okay with it because I know like but unfortunately though, those were typically the exams like I did very well, right? So it didn't really mean anything, right? Because like I had done everything I could. So, but once again, like, it really is contingent on my behavior, right? Yeah. Like if I've done everything right and I've been doing everything right, yeah, totally, I could be in that mindset. Yeah. But
it requires it.
I'm rarely in that spot though, where it's like there isn't something nagging me, where it's just like I could be doing this better, or I could have done this better. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't know.
Yeah. There's also like a present tense version of that though, where I don't know who this originates from, but there's that saying that's like, okay, if there's something you can do about it, then don't worry, do the thing you can do. And if you can't, then don't worry because you can't do anything. Like that sentiment. It's all I don't know. I don't tend to be this type of person, but I've definitely had experiences where even like I was talking with you guys before we started the call, and just like I kind of wake up and there's like 1,000 things that I need to do before moving. And I can approach that from one of two mindsets. I could just like fret and worry about just like getting all that shit done. Or I can just kind of like, for lack of a better word, relax and do it. Like you don't have to be just like anxious while you're doing the thing that you have to do. Just fucking do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think like the biggest change in mindset for me that I think maps on best to this is like whenever I begin working out, and because I bemoan the fact that I'm out of shape whenever I'm not working out.
Yes.
But once I start working out, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track, right? Like I'm doing what I can to be in shape. So there's no reason to like bemoan the fact that I'm not in shape anymore, because I'm doing what I can to be in shape. 100%. You know what I mean? Once I think like, I typically adopt that mindset once I'm like in those habits. So
but you can't point to a clear like weakness of will.
Exactly. It's
like you can be like, I was actually like at the gym today, and like on the stationary bike next to me was this huge guy. Like this guy was like horribly overweight, but he was like actually on there for like 40 minutes just doing what he could. Yeah. It's like he didn't seem to be like fretting. He was definitely sweating though. But but yeah, I mean, like at a certain point, like it can't be a positive thing to just kind of fret if you are already on the path you need to be on, right? It's just kind of like you're doing the
worst too. Like the worst case scenario is when you just worry about something and then you also don't fix it. Like that's just the worst of both possible worlds.
Oh, that's 100%. Miserable.
100%.
Which is just like, dude, that's like a mental illness, honestly. That like I don't think I often fall into that, but it's just horrible when you do, because you're just like, I don't know, especially things that are outside your control can definitely turn into that, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
like whether it's like grad admissions or whatever. And it's just like, I can't control this thing, but yet I am involved with it or what, it's just like like that's that is the worst feeling in the world.
Actually, I take back what I said. I do slip into paralysis where I do, become fretful of my inaction, which just further causes
because it's
inaction.
Exhausting to fret. Yes,
It is.
Yes.
It is extraordinarily mentally taxing to fret.
Yes.
It's horrible.
You all the energy that could be going in towards making decisions has gone into regretting decisions.
Yes.
Yes.
The tank is empty.
Yes. And it also reminded me, like I told you guys, like my days are so wide open at this point where like anything can be done at any time.
No structure.
It reminded me of that just inane habit I have that we talked about in the Dostoevsky Notes from Underground Part 1, where you just try to like over optimize everything. And I'm just thinking okay, I'll do this and then this and then this and but it actually makes sense to do this first. And it's like, just shut up and just like
you've put the gas into like the thinking engine, but the car is not moving.
No, you're just like revving the engine in neutral. It's just like, okay, dude, it just doesn't, just put it in gear and just start to drive in the general direction. You don't have to, like, it's so annoying.
You're sacrificing efficiency by trying to plan your efficiencies.
It's like overheating your phone on Google Maps to find like the ideal route when you just know the route already and you can just, it's so stupid. It is maybe the number one thing that I hate about myself is that I do that. And it's so annoying.
Once again, I've never done that.
Yeah,
I've never overplanned in my life.
It's so annoying.
Never. I underplan. I'm the exact opposite. I'm just like, I don't
not underplan.
Well, you know what's weird
Both.
is, dude, I love underplanning when it comes to things that are fun. Like if we're doing a trip or something, like every time I fly out to see Brian and we hike, we barely have a plan put together. We just do whatever. And that's the best. It's the best. But then when I'm trying to figure out like 4 goddamn hours in the morning, I'm just like, how could we best optimize this time? It's just like, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. And I don't know why. Like my brain defaults into that state. And it's so like, I have to stop because it's so tiring.
What makes it especially funny is like I like Giffen said earlier, you're like covetous of your time, and it's even funnier when your time's wasted. Given this mindset that I hear, where it's just like you plan out every single hour. So when someone just steals like a block of 4 hours, like I can understand why that just enrages you.
You've molded that hour perfectly, and some oaf comes along and is like, "Hey, I need you to haul bricks for an hour."
And you know what's funny is that actually whenever because like everything, there are times where I'm planning everything and there are also times where I'm just completely not doing that and living every day like it's a hiking trip with Brian, you know what I mean? And when I find myself planning shit out, it is synonymous with not getting a lot done but feeling exhausted at the end of every day. It's so stupid. Like I was literally talking to Giffen about what I was planning on working on tomorrow in what order. And then I realized I was like, dude, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. Like just wake up and do whatever you want to first do. Just check stuff off in whatever order you want.
That's so funny that you do that. I've never done that.
It's so annoying.
I do that too.
Oh, it's so annoying because I have a podcast. Dude, it's like a not a phobia, but just like, I don't know, something that I slip into where like I have a podcast at 5 tomorrow with a guest. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to wake up and read the text or whatever, and then go to the gym. And then it's supposed to be nice out in the morning. So I need to like work on my car a little bit in the morning. And then it's supposed to rain. So I'll take that time to review or whatever. And it's just like, okay, if it works like that, that's a great plan. But it's not going to work like that. You know, it's like, it's just not, I don't know. Something's going to take longer than I think it will. Or like, it's just, I don't know. It fucking makes me so mad. It makes me so mad that I do that. But I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a digression. Because I actually thought, I wanted to read this one quote. Because like, I read this quote and I fucking loved this.
Page? It's
very short. It's on 29. It's a quote by Jacques. He says, Because without knowing what is written up above, none of us knows what we want or what we are doing. And we follow our whims, which we call reason, or our reason, which is often nothing but a dangerous whim, which sometimes turns out well, sometimes badly. And he continues later on. How many wisely conceived projects have failed and will fail in the future? How many insane projects have succeeded and will succeed? And it was just like, I read that and I was just, I loved it because it's so, I mean, it just hit me as so deeply true, where it was just like,
yeah, he's kind of questioning like a perception of free will here, because I don't think you read this part, but he says, like right prior to the last part of you interjected, is it we who control destiny or destiny which controls us? You know?
Yeah, and he's pointing to this like intrinsic unpredictability to life, where sometimes, I mean, this goes to exactly what I was talking about. Sometimes you have this rational plan and it's all put together and it just burns you. And then other times you do stuff in an, he calls it an insane whim, and it works out perfectly. And it's so true. It's so true. I mean, there are just countless instances like this. I mean, I like.
Yeah, so much of life is outside of your control.
Yeah, you have to kind of address that and deal with it.
Yeah, and it's also, it's just like I feel like we definitely overestimate what is within the purview of our control. It's so little. It's so little.
I don't know. I feel like I have some angst over that fact. So maybe I'm conscious of that more than you guys.
It actually should, I think like this dialogue should actually alleviate some of that angst, because whether you overplan or underplan,
yes.
Well, I mean, like, I think like there's like I'm going to butcher the quotes. I'll just paraphrase it, but this is another thing you got from his captain. Another quote, which is something along the lines of, okay, prudence is something that, men acquire essentially to explain away kind of misfortune whenever they've planned properly, right? Like in the sense that, like, okay, if you're prudent before entering, some sort of endeavor, okay, if it goes poorly, at the very least you can say I was prudent upon entering it. You know what I mean? But other than that, it's more of like a consoling,
yes.
like device,
yes.
rather than like anything that will necessarily lead to like a better outcome, just given how much things are outside of our control, which I liked as well. So
I don't know why, but it connected with me so strongly. Because it's like, I don't know. It's so like, I just feel like we waste so much energy trying to control everything, and it's just, I don't know. It almost goes back to, the conversation we were having before about the sheer absurdity of life and almost taking refuge in that, where it's just like, yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's Sisyphusian for sure. It's like, well, I know that no matter if I spend 80 years just nonstop planning, like the amount of control I will have over the variables is minuscule. And yet, like every day I find myself picking up that boulder and pushing it up the hill. Like, am I getting to the top? No.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I feel like I'm getting further up, but
I don't know how the book ends, but I get the sense that Diderot would very much align with like Nagel's solution to the absurd, where he would just say, yeah, it's not that big a deal in a positive or a negative direction. It's just like, yeah, just introduce a little bit more irony into your life. Just, just maybe allow yourself to smirk a little bit, that like, wow, I put so much time and effort into this and it went the other way, or the opposite. And it's also deeply, it's even strange when things do going to go according to the plans. Like, how was it that I was able to correctly predict the universe almost in this way?
Yeah,
that's true.
The universe is, collaborating in my favor.
Yeah. It's just, you get lucky when the plan goes as it should, and you get lucky sometimes when the plan doesn't go as it should. It's just,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I am loving the book though so far. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an all-time read for me so far.
So
far, like I might go top 5 or top 10 myself so far as well. I mean, we'll see obviously how it concludes, but I it's so unique. Like, I've never read a book like this.
It's amazing.
It's just timeless. I mean, you would like we said earlier, you would never know this was written in like the 18th century, except for like
references
Cossacks,
to battles,
or the fact that like the master continues to like inhale from the snuff box. You know what I mean? Like just like they're obviously like outdated references, but I mean, yeah.
Can I read another quote that just like hit home for me? This is Jacques talking to his master again. He says, "Master, in life, one never knows what to rejoice about or what to feel sorry about. Good brings bad after it, and bad brings good. We travel in darkness underneath whatever it is that is written up above, all of us equally unreasonable in our hopes, our joys, and our afflictions. When I cry, I often think that I'm a fool." And I just like, I don't know, that hit me again. Because his master responds, "And what about when you laugh?" And Jacques responds, "I still think that I'm a fool. However, I can't stop myself from crying or from laughing." And it's just like, I mean, again, in like pre-discussing the book Saturday after the game night, Adam and I were talking about how like you can never know the counterfactual to anything. And it's so funny that it's just like we're like trapped in this very paradoxical state that, again, I think the only solution is just to be a little bit more like ironic or a little bit more relaxed about, where it's just, if you look back on literally anything that ever happened in your life, you have no idea what the counterfactual was for even the smallest of decisions. And we can easily recognize that, but then we have the hubris to actually think that our projections about the future are accurate and sort of can be controlled and can be shaped to the outcome that we want. And it's just like
you can cite like your previous like observations about counterfactuals that you don't have access to.
Exactly. And it's
just
just
the simplest thing of like, I can turn left at the stop sign instead of right. Like you actually don't know exactly what have happened there.
No, it's literally, I mean, anything. Like the smallest thing, you have no idea. And I feel like we don't realize how often we are in a state of perpetual blindness. Both, there's no knowledge that we have about counterfactuals in the past and none about the future. Literally none. Like we're living in this just present moment of blindness. In a way, in a way that I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it is definitely not something that I don't know. It's definitely not something that is just like in the zeitgeist, I guess. Like people are always just planning about like, oh, their 401k projected to be at this by this date, and I'll be retired at this age. It's just like, maybe not.
Yeah, I'd say near blindness. I feel like we as humans can kind of scrape some basic, correlations, and that's kind of basically the frontier.
No, I agree with that, Giffen. Like you can definitely like, okay, this pattern of behavior will lead to this pattern of outcomes.
Yes.
But
science has to kind of address the fact that it's like we don't have access to the real counterfactuals and such. Even science has to kind of admit to like our huge limitations.
Yeah.
Extraordinary limitations of knowledge.
And, well, I guess it's also usually pretty clear. I guess you can always define things in a negative sense too, where it's like, okay, I mean, obviously, like if I don't undertake certain activities, it's not possible for me to have certain outcomes. You know what I mean? Like I will never get in shape if I literally just never choose to work out. So it's like you can sort of know some negative counterfactuals.
Even
I guess.
Then, you could probably imagine some like Jacquian kind of counterfactual where you just get in shape, never visiting a gym.
No, of course. I mean, it's like you actively choose not to go to the gym, but then suddenly, like 30 years down the line, there's like a new pill out that just like slims you down. And once again, it's not to say that could happen or that's a likely thing. It's just that like there would be like just like true absurdity to that, like in the sense that you weren't prudent about your health, but ultimately you just ended up but I'm sure like there are many situations akin to that, right, where it's like perhaps, I mean, I think we've all had scenarios where we weren't like especially prudent, but things turned out well. Like like I mean, I've had that happen many times in my own life where like I didn't plan properly. Like I
mean, the number, we've talked about this before, but like the fact that I literally happened to choose Pitt over Penn State, not planning on going into philosophy, but it happened to be the case that Pitt is like number 4 in the world and Penn State is, whatever. It's just like
Absurd.
Like absurd. And like who, I mean, it's like, I don't know.
Like you didn't even know you were rolling these dice, but you got snake eyes.
Yes. It's crazy. We're just like constantly rolling dice about things that most of the rolls won't even show up for. You know what I mean? It's like you don't even know like what futures you've either closed off or potentially opened constantly.
Yeah, back to the fig tree quote. The knowledge of the kind of frontier possibilities being like nearly endless. That can be kind of exhausting mentally, but I mean, the reality is a million things that you can't simultaneously imagine every possible, alternative conclusion or, possibilities based on previous actions. They're all kind of just roles that happened and maybe you weren't conscious of them.
I liked, there was also a point made about sort of like, it was an epistemic point, I guess, that kind of flowed in the same vein. A few quotes from 64 and 66 that I had about it, I really liked. This is Jacques talking. He says, has not everyone his own character, his own interests, his own tastes and passions, according to which he either exaggerates or attenuates everything? Tell the thing as it is, you say. That might not happen twice in one day in the whole of a large town. And is the person who listens any better qualified to listen than the person who speaks? No. Which is why in the whole of a large town, it can hardly happen twice in one day that someone's words are understood in the same way as they are spoken. And it's not just that one's words are hardly ever understood in the same way that they are spoken. Even worse is that it is, even worse than that is that one's actions are hardly ever judged in the way that they are performed. And I loved that quote too, because he's like, okay, I mean, he's almost like piling on to the fact that we never know kind of, like I said, we're blind with respect to the counterfactual. It's like, okay, we're also getting just sloppy input informationally, from people. And I don't know. I loved, he just says later on 66, life is a series of misunderstandings. There are misunderstandings of love, misunderstandings of friendship, misunderstandings of politics, finance, church, the law, commerce, women, husbands. Just trails off. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's so true. It's like that actually is how life works. Like you have an idea in your head. You try to approximate it with your own words. Those words are then filtered by whoever's listening through whatever is going on in their life currently. However, your relationship is constituted. Everything is just like an approximation of everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They may nod along and not understand the same way you do, or they may disagree and just, understand or not understand major points.
It reminded me of Dostoevsky's kind of point that our greatest advantage is the fact that we can act to our disadvantage and sort of be free in that sense. Where it's just like, he it's not even if we, Dostoevsky would obviously say you shouldn't want to be sort of like the most rational man or act to your greatest advantage all of the time, because then you cease to exist almost. But it's like, even if you wanted that, that's actually not even on the table. You know what I mean? Like epistemically, it's just not.
No, it's not. I mean, if you were presented with perfect knowledge that you could trust, that you would be most fulfilled in life staying currently, or at your current job, just for the rest of your life.
I wouldn't even trust it. Yes, I couldn't. I literally couldn't.
I mean, like,
how?
Yeah.
I know. It was like I don't think we actually talk about this, but in Existentialism is a Humanism, where Sartre is commenting on the fact that, when Abraham is told by God to sacrifice his son.
Yes.
I was just thinking about that.
Abraham himself must actually even be sure, am I actually talking to God right now? Even if the knowledge is perfect.
Thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are real world examples where like, people do horrible acts and then claim that they were told to by God. It's like the line between like a psychopath and, some like the most supremely devout Christian is very thin,
Yeah.
Like that, if that woman was actually divinely inspired, like she would be a saint.
That woman that drowned her kids. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, there's no better faithfulness to God than like literally sacrificing everything that you care about.
No, of
At the
course.
same time, like if that was just a little bit of like neurons misfiring, that's not good.
Yeah, no, it's like if God
And
told her to do
she
that,
didn't debate that. It was God.
yes, no, and it's just like, okay, even if you have perfect knowledge, you have to choose to accept the perfect knowledge. There is no escape. There's no escape.
Yeah, it's like this really kind of tears down the idea that such thing is accessible, even theoretically. It kind of breaks down.
Yeah,
like if you can't even be certain of like any basic premise is counterfactual, like how on earth do you make such a decision?
no,
Like Abraham.
no, it's just no. This book is just speaking to my soul right now, honestly. Like I can't think of a better moment in my life to read this. I obviously I think this moment this book is like apropos for literally any moment in anyone's life to read, but I think it hits even a little bit differently in this moment of sort of wild uncertainty for me.
Yeah.
True.
It's just so I feel like that's just like an amplifier of everything he's saying.
And Adam seems to be the opposite, the most rigid structure imaginable.
It is right now, but that
it's still good. So it survives both angles.
Sure, but I mean, it does compel me to seek something else. Yes. But much of this unit that we've gone through has. But it's also a bit of stoicism involved on my part right now, where it's like, okay, I've made peace with where I'm at right now, in the sense that like I have a plan, I know what I want to do, making it work, and I don't know. I mean, like, currently I can't be doing anything other than what I'm doing right now. So
and you don't know that it actually would have been better to have happened according to plan. Like, not just, you know what I mean?
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What emotionally seems like a huge burden now, you can look back and say, like, maybe it's almost stereotypical, but like that might have been the greatest thing ever.
Who knows?
Doors had opened that you didn't know.
Who knows?
Yes. I mean, there could literally be like a horrible experience or whatever that itself actually precluded a way worse outcome.
I was going to say, I think in the book, I think Jacques, this might be a little bit beyond Adam, I don't remember exactly. I think Jacques at one point kind of points out the fact that one of the greatest things that's happened in his life was that he was beaten.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think this was in context with like the dogs, that might have been beyond Adam
it's
at the moment, but
Adam,
like, but just barely, like he's almost at it. So like it's a very fitting moment where Jacques is just like sitting there like philosophically arguing. He's like, but should we deny this? Like it could be a transformative moment, like a beating. The master says.
I do definitely understand how Jacques' sort of ideas about fatalism intersect with that conclusion, because it's like I kind of do understand how that seems to sort of tamper down his reactivity to things. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you have that, he's a character, but if you have the infusion of that almost humility in a sense, where it's like you just don't know anything. It's I kind of understand how that would make you, it kind of allows you to, I don't know, it's a cliche, but like enjoy the ride a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, it in a weird way, it kind of intersects with kind of like that kind of Christian belief of like, God works in mysterious ways, where it's even though like there's clearly a enormous negative here, like I don't want to like necessarily map myself onto that, but like in a certain way, like in Jacques' presentation, it's like, if you take that perspective where you actually just admit that you have such little knowledge, like you kind of take the attitude of like, let's actually see how this contributes to the path I'm on.
Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, obviously the Christian formulation of that is a little bit childlike in the sense that it's always framed as like, there's a greater good, you just have to see it. And like,
or that there's one that is actively being like, intelligently designed, whereas
exactly. And Diderot would be just
the
like,
priors are off, but
Diderot would probably point out, well, like, okay, I mean, the flip side of the coin is true too. It's like, you don't know how much you've lost. It's like both are true. You have escaped many perils, but you've actually foregone many feasts of fortune yourself.
Yeah.
So it's just like, but then again, like he even says, Jacques' response to the fact that you can never know anything for sure is just, he says to not give a damn. So it's just like, yeah. I mean, he's like channeling or Nagel, 200 years before Nagel channeled Nagel. So I don't know. I'm loving this book. I can't wait to finish it for a part 2.
Yeah, this has to be one of the more underrated books.
Yes, of all
because I literally could, because I try to like see if there's like other like secondary YouTube content, for example, or like online discussions and forums about like works whenever we discuss them occasionally, or like audiobooks if I can listen to it more freely because it's more flexible with my work schedule. And there's like nothing on this.
There's nothing.
There's so little content. I think one of like the first result, if you look at this on YouTube, is like a video with like 400 views. It's like, how critically undervalued can this be?
It's a gem. This is a gem.
It's a complete gem. Yeah.
It's a gem. I don't know that I have anything really much else to say about it. I mean, we'll obviously...
I think we can tie everything, back together once we get to the end.
Yeah, we'll definitely continue with a part 2, which I hope listeners enjoyed the part 1. I can't imagine this is going to go downhill. It doesn't seem possible.
No.
I don't think so. So, all right. Well, I hope, tune in for a part 2. I hope in the blindness of looking towards the future, it wasn't a disappointment, but I doubt it will be. All right. So thanks for listening, and tune in next time. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Plato's Cave. I always enjoy discussing topics with these two guys. So if you want to support the show in any way, you can do so simply by sharing it. I'm hoping to get this show out to more people. And so if you want to share it on Twitter or social media, that would really help me. You can also rate it on Apple Podcasts, like this video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe via Apple Podcasts or an RSS feed. You can also discuss it on your own show and link back to my website, or you can connect me with recommended guests or topics to cover. You can get in contact with me at platoscavepodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_C_Myers, and I now have a website for my philosophy endeavors at jordanmyers.org. If you want to know a little bit more about me and my fellow co-hosts, as I said in the introduction, I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. I did my undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh, where I studied mechanical engineering and philosophy, and now that I'm back at school, I'm hoping to more closely study moral responsibility, free will, ethics, epistemology, and moral psychology. Those are topics that I was introduced to and got really interested in my undergrad work. So Adam and Giffen accompanied me on this show, and Adam is one of my oldest friends. We actually met in kindergarten, and we've been interested in philosophical topics for as long as we can remember, and in a lot of ways it's been the basis of our friendship. Adam studied chemistry and biology at Cornell, and he is currently working at a law firm. And he's especially interested in moral responsibility as well, but also law, religion, and free will. Giffen is also one of my oldest friends, and we've been friends since elementary school as well. Giffen studied biology and economics at RPI, and now he works in human health research. He believes that there's very interesting overlap between both of his fields of study and philosophy, and he's particularly interested in exploring political philosophy. So this series was right up his alley. And with all of that information, again, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you get in contact with me or follow my work in any way that you deem reasonable to do. So with that, thank you for listening.